Hello, I'm Charlie Whittam. Thank you for joining us for LPB's electronic field trip to Louisiana's Old State Capitol. I think you will enjoy this trip. The Old State Capitol is a lovely building filled with history. In a few moments, you will see the first half of the field trip on the design and early years of the Old State Capitol. Then we'll take a closer look at the events of the Civil War and how the Old State Capitol fared through the battles. Then we'll join you back here with students and teachers to ask questions to some of our experts from the Old State Capitol. With us today are Carol Haas, the author of the book on the Old State Capitol, former president of the Old State Capitol Associates and a docent at the Old State Capitol. Susan Vincent is a director of the docent program at the Old State Capitol, and Charlotte Wall is the education coordinator at the Old State Capitol. So sit back, enjoy the trip, and we will see you soon to answer your questions. Louisiana's Old State Capitol, the Castle on the Hill. This National Historic Landmark is one of the most distinguished examples of Gothic architecture in the United States. Inside these walls holds an account of Louisiana's history, survival, and purpose. Built in 1850 high atop a bluff facing the Mississippi River, the Old State Capitol in Baton Rouge has seen days of glory and suffered many indignities. Over a century and a half, the Castle on the Hill stood witness to history, including Louisiana's secession from the United States, suffered 3 major fires, oversaw the impeachment trials of Governor Huey Long, inaugurated a governor and his grandson, exactly 100 years apart. Hi everyone, I'm Charlie Whittam, and welcome to our program. Over the years, this Castle on the Hill has not only served as the seat of government for the state, it has also been a prison, a hospital, and even barracks for Union soldiers. Now, it's a wonderfully preserved jewel that serves as a museum to Louisiana's political and governmental history. And when people first come inside, they are welcomed by the beautiful rotunda, which includes a spiral staircase made of cast iron, and overhead, the breathtaking glass umbrella dome that features over 2,000 individual panes. But these 2 signature pieces were added after the Civil War and were not part of the original building. This Gothic structure opened in 1850 and completed a vision created by New Orleans architect James Dakin. And that's where we'll begin our story, but we'll do it with the help of a retired school teacher who has literally written the book on the history of the Old State Capitol. Ever since retiring as an elementary and high school French teacher, Carol Haas teaches in a new setting as a volunteer tour guide of the Old State Capitol. In fact, Carol wrote the book on the history of the Old State Capitol. Back in the 1840s, the town of Baton Rouge, population 4,000, was making a bid to move the state capitol from New Orleans. Critics statewide said politicians were mixing too little state business with too much pleasure of the Big Easy. Baton Rouge citizens pooled $20,000 to purchase land from Judge Thomas Gibbs Morgan and convinced the legislature to move the state capitol to Baton Rouge. The castle design was the brainchild of New Orleans architect James Dakin. He convinced lawmakers of the idea with the simplest of means.
When he first drew up his drawing, he just sent a little sketch of a drawing and said, "This is what I want to build." It looked like a castle, and he decided he wanted the castle because every other capital in the country was like the Capitol in Washington, D.C. It had a dome in the middle and then the 2 wings on the sides. He thought Louisiana was a distinctive state and that it needed a distinctive capital. So he decided on the Gothic architecture, and he told the legislature it was a little cheaper to build it that way, and they liked that, so that was agreed upon.
Dakin's majestic building on the bluff looks to be made of stone. It is, in fact, made of brick.
The architect did not want it to look brick, though. He wanted it to look strong, like a castle. So after they put the brick up, they covered it with a plaster and then scored the plaster to look like huge stones, just to imply strength.
The state capitol was completed in November of 1849 at a cost of $400,000. The castle on the hill was only 11 years old when Governor Thomas Overton Moore called a special session in the House chambers on January 26, 1861. The legislature voted to secede from the Union. 16 months after that announcement in this chamber, Union forces made their way into Baton Rouge, occupying the town and the State House. And in 1862, just 4 days after Christmas, as Union troops resided here and Confederate soldiers were held as prisoners, a great fire started in a chimney, engulfed the building, and completely destroyed the interior. All that was left was the great white exterior walls, hovering over the town like a ghost of the war. Louisiana's Confederate capital would move north to Opelousas, then Shreveport. Union powers would later rename New Orleans as the new capital. This shell of a building would remain dormant for the next 2 decades.
The differences between the northern and southern states were rooted in deep cultural and political differences. But in the end, what mattered most was money. In Louisiana, that fight began the day Abraham Lincoln was elected president.
Keep in mind that Lincoln was the first president of the United States who was not a slaveholder and not sympathetic to slavery.
The Southern people think the result of the election is a sort of declaration of hostility by the North. Nearly every day, Lincoln's effigy is hanged in the principal streets and squares. Secession is openly talked of, apparently with increasing confidence in its success.
In January 1861, a convention of Louisiana's leaders met at the state capitol in Baton Rouge. They voted 113 to 17 for secession. The news was announced to a cheering crowd outside. For almost 50 years, Louisiana had been one of the United States. Now she had torn herself from that union, but at a cost her people could not yet conceive.
Every one of us loved that flag. The flag of the United States had been our flag. And yet we felt it must go, and our flag rise in its place.
From public edifices, hotels, and private buildings, the Pelican flag was hoisted and displayed its ample folds to the breeze. The church bells proclaimed the news of secession in vibrating tones, whilst the deep voice of the cannon announced it even more loudly.
After secession, Louisiana joined with 10 other southern states in forming a new nation, the Confederate States of America. But of the thousands of young men who eagerly stepped forward to fight, few were prepared for the horrors that this war would inflict upon them and their homeland.
Although there was this sort of feeling that one Southerner could whip 5 Yankees or 5 Northerners, they had no idea what it would actually be like when war came along, what it would take to sustain the armies in the field, what it would entail as far as losing fathers, sons, and brothers in combat. They just had no clue what a long war was going to be like.
After taking New Orleans, Union troops headed upriver to Baton Rouge. Governor Moore and the state legislature fled west and moved the state capital to Opelousas, ahead of the Union invasion. Baton Rouge fell to Admiral Farragut peacefully. A few weeks into the occupation of the city, however, 40 Confederate guerrillas launched a surprise attack on a group of Union sailors as they crossed the river in a rowboat. The sailors were just looking for a place to do their laundry. Admiral Farragut did not take the matter lightly. He ordered his fleet to open fire on Baton Rouge.
The town, what there is left of it, is a deserted, desolate place. The streets are forsaken. the stores are closed. To the east of us are a large number of stacks of chimneys, which are all that is left of what 6 months ago were elegant residences.
I hope you found it interesting to see how the old state capitol, which was in the heart of Baton Rouge, suffered through the Civil War along with the community. Let's go to our first question. Go ahead, please.
My name is Alex Allen. I go to Mayfield Elementary, and I live in Slidell, Louisiana. What purpose did the old state capitol serve for soldiers during the war?
All right, excellent question. Charlotte, can we go with you first?
Absolutely. The purpose that the building served during the Civil War for the soldiers was that after the Battle of Baton Rouge, the city was occupied by the Union soldiers. The Union soldiers moved into the building, they lived in the building, they had their hospital in the building, and they had their prison in that building as well. They did, the prisoners were, of course, Confederate prisoners, and they lived in that building from August of 1862 to December of 1862 when a fire broke out. The fire that broke out was early in the day, and they were able to put the fire out, but unbeknownst to them, the fire had moved up into the rafters of the building, and the building was completely destroyed on December 28th, 1862.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Now, let's move to question number 2. We have another question. Let's go ahead. Let's hear it.
Hi, my name is Judy Miller. I am a paraprofessional at Mere Elementary at Acadia Parish, and I'm also a Louisiana author of a newly published children's book. My question is, why did the appearance of the old state capitol change tremendously with the rebuild? And why were the turrets removed?
Very good question. Carol, can you answer that question for us?
I will. The building did burn, but it was burned inside. It was gutted. The outside walls still stood, so there was a remnant of the building left. When they decided to rebuild, they needed a new capitol. They just needed something that looked new and fresh. But they were left with the walls, and rather than go to the expense of tearing down those walls, they decided to rebuild inside them. So the outside of the building basically is the same. A 4th floor was added to the north and south sides of the building. Mm-hmm. A dome, a beautiful dome, was added. Mm-hmm. That's one of the hallmarks of the building. Sure. And a roof above that, which is called a lantern, which has lots of windows so the light can filter in through the stained glass. Also, the beautiful staircase, which is in the middle, that was added as well, because they don't really know what kind of stairs were there before.
Oh, interesting.
But the staircase, the dome, there was a new entrance added. The entrance that goes to North Boulevard in Baton Rouge, that was added as well, because the town had grown and needed a new entrance. The building was painted red, believe it or not. It's now a beautiful kind of off-white, but for a time it was red. And then to offset the lantern above the dome, the architect decided he wanted to put some turrets on the building. And on the towers at the corners of the building, there were some huge turrets. I don't know how tall they were. I'm guessing probably 18 to 20 feet tall, made of cast iron. People didn't like them. They were really ugly to begin with. And when another fire occurred, they discovered that the weight of those cast iron turrets was causing structural damage to the towers underneath. Oh, okay. So they removed all of them, and no one really knows what happened to them. There was some speculation that they were thrown into the river, and some that they were just used for scrap iron.
And that's why the turrets were removed?
That's why the turrets were removed, because of the structural damage and the weight. There were some smaller little frou-frou kind of turrets that were on the corners of each tower and other parts of the building. Those were also made of cast iron, and they were removed in 1928 when Huey Long was first elected, because huge chunks of them were falling to the ground and were a danger to people.
It was a danger to the people.
That's
okay.
Right.
Well, that's very interesting. Thank you. Let's move to question 3. This is our question is from the 3rd and 4th grade classes of Bridget Moss at First Baptist Church of Slidell. They want to know, if the state capitol located in Baton Rouge is a symbol of Louisiana, then why were stones from other countries brought in to build it? Why don't we use material from our state? Susan, is that something you'd like to take a
Yes.
crack at?
Yes, I can. You may be thinking of the current state capitol because there is a great deal of marble in that building that was culled from all over the globe. But the old state capitol is actually made from materials right here in Louisiana. In fact, under the stucco covering, which, as Carol had mentioned before in the video, was put on top of brick to make it look like stone, but the actual structure is made of red brick made here in Baton Rouge.
Okay.
In fact, it was made by, most of it was made by prisoners at the state penitentiary, and in those days that was right over by Laurel Street.
Oh, okay.
So that was from here. And the marble floors in the rotunda area on the first and second floors is from Missouri, Cape Girardeau, Missouri. So most of the materials are from right here in the United States.
And as I recall, it's very, very beautiful marble tile. You can even see some interesting items if you look real close.
Yes, you can. There are a number of fossils, and I'm sure most of the children know what fossils are. And so next time you come, you'll have to look and see how many you can find.
Look very closely. It's very beautiful. Okay, I think we have time for one more question before we get back to our trip. Let's have our next question, please. The class from Donna Wilridge of Church Point Elementary.
This is Sheila Laverne from Church Point Elementary, and the question is, why was cast iron used for the decorations and the fence?
Sheila, thank you very much. Beautiful fence at the old state capitol. Susan, why cast iron?
Well, it is beautiful, and in order to be able to render that much decoration, you need a material that is going to be able to be molded, and that is cast iron. For a large fence like that and for a large area, you're not going to use wood. And of course, today we're used to chain link fences. They didn't have that material in 1850.
Thankfully.
So, yes, yes, because the cast iron fence is really pretty. And when you come to the old state capitol, you'll have to get up close and see all of the symbolism that has to do with our wonderful state.
Yeah, beautiful restored fence as well, thanks to the efforts of folks that did not want that to fall apart. And it's a beautiful framework to the old state capitol.
Yes, it is.
We have more questions coming up, and but until we do that, let's get back to the rest of our field trip. The legislature made a bold decision in 1877 asking the federal government for funds to repair the State House in Baton Rouge. After all, it was destroyed by Union soldiers during the Civil War. The federal government approved the request with the help of architect William Ferret. The old state capitol came back to life in 1882, but with a number of changes.
The building has changed substantially over time, and in fact we have a model downstairs that really illustrates this. Pre-Civil War, it was a white castle-looking building, just very traditional, very stately. After the Civil War, the building became red, and we added turrets and towers and a lot of frou-frou.
The restored Louisiana capitol drew criticism from Mark Twain. He was not impressed from what he saw from the outside.
During that time, Mark Twain was a river pilot, and he was piloting down the Mississippi on his way to New Orleans, and he saw the building being restored. And he said that it was a shame that the dynamite did not destroy what a charitable fire had started.
If Ferret was off target with the turrets, he more than made up for it inside. Visitors see it the moment they walk in the rotunda. His fourth-floor addition was created to house the building's signature feature, a multicolored glass dome that sits above the rotunda like an umbrella.
Well, the dome, I think, is what is the aha moment for everybody. When visitors come in from, and they do come in from all over the United States and all over the world, that's the fun part, because I'll take them to the staircase and say, now look up, and it's the aha moment. Everyone just gasps when they see the dome because it's so beautiful.
Other inspiring points of interest include both the House and Senate chambers. The current tranquil and elegant setting stands in direct contrast to some of the grittier days of past politics.
there are so many stories of fistfights and things going on here. And to me, this is a very dignified building. It's beautiful and dignified and magnificent, and I can't imagine the turmoil and the tumult that happened here. No, I can't.
Nor can some of the old state capitol's youngest visitors, especially when the sunlight hits both chambers just right and illuminates the floor with a rainbow of colors.
And many of the little girls come in and want to be the princess in the castle. So yes, they love it, and so many of them dance here. The little girls will come in and just go in the House chamber and the Senate chamber, which has a flat floor and is empty, and they'll just twirl around and dance. They love it. It's the aura. It's the aura of the building. It just, when you come in here, you feel it.
Oh, I think the House chamber is my favorite, because when you go in there, one of the reasons it's so grand is because William Ferret, the architect for the 1882 restoration, you could tell that he loved the House of Representatives, that he thought that was the most important chamber in this building because it's so ornate. That's where you have the little magnolia blossoms that are all around the ceiling, and the really ornate chandeliers that hang in there, the beautiful work on the gallery that overlooks the House chamber. You can tell that he really loved that chamber, and he thought it was the people's chamber.
The days of the old state capitol as the seat of government were numbered when Governor Huey Long came to power. Although the need for a new structure was apparent to all, money was just not available. Long did order the turrets on the towers removed after a large chunk of one tower broke off and fell to the ground. Long once said there wasn't another building in the whole country that was such a disgrace, and he wouldn't pay $25 for the whole thing. But it was Long fighting for his political life early in his administration, leaving no time to worry about the problems of an aging state house. In April of 1929, the House of Representatives voted to impeach Long and sent the charges to the Senate. The Senate summoned Long to face the charges. The impeachment proceedings did not last very long. 15 senators presented a document stating they would never vote for impeachment, regardless of the evidence. And Huey Long survived, and his power only grew. A year and a half later, the Kingfish would successfully push his plan for a new state capitol. With the attention focused on the new building, the old state capitol languished in neglect.
After the new Capitol opened, of course, this became just general office space for different organizations and different people, and it kind of languished over time because nobody was really taking care of it. Nobody loved it and looked after it.
The 6 decades after state government moved to a new state capital, Louisiana's old state capital was falling apart.
It was a mess, and the roof leaked, and water was coming up from through the basement. And I told somebody one time, I testified before a committee, I said, you know, the building literally is rotting from the bottom up and from the top down. And it was really in danger of being lost. I think at some point it would have reached the point that the building would have been condemned because you were really losing a lot of the structure.
The building really was deteriorating at a very rapid rate, and had we not gotten a hold of it, I just don't know. The exterior of the building probably would have been okay, but the interior really would have been much, much worse had we not done something right then.
In the 1990s, a massive restoration project was launched to give new life and new meaning to this old state house. The building would undergo its biggest restoration since 1882. This old state house is more than a repository of historic artifacts. The story of Louisiana's history comes to life throughout every floor with interactive displays, knowledgeable tour guides, and a chance to let your imagination walk back in time.
It's a history museum. It's a museum of political history, and it's intended to demonstrate to those visitors what the past was in an effort to try to show what the potential future will be. And so we look at it in that light.
It's a generational story that can best be shown with two past Louisiana governors. In 1896, Murphy J. Foster was re-elected governor of Louisiana, and the inauguration celebration took place on the grounds of the old state capitol. 100 years later, on January 8, 1996, his grandson, Murphy James Mike Foster, took the oath of office on the same grounds as his grandfather. The story of the two Fosters is housed in what used to be the governor's office space inside the old state capitol. Continue the tour and you will come across the life and history of another former governor, Huey Long. A painted crack down the middle of the room symbolizes the great divide of opinion people had of the powerful governor back in the late 1920s and early 30s.
As you know, in those days, there was no such thing as Republicans, Democrats. It was either pro-Long, anti-Long. We don't try to form that opinion of the good side of Huey, of textbooks and new roads, charity hospital, and then the other side of Huey, which was the deduct box and some of the other things that maybe aren't quite as pleasant to the discussion. You form your own opinion at the end of that tour, and to me, that it forces you to think.
What most people will never see in this castle is the structure above the beautiful glass dome. It appears so magical and larger than life to all who see it from below. Chief Maintenance Engineer Carl Smith knows every inch of this building. A hidden spiral staircase takes him to a catwalk above the old state capitol's glass dome. Who actually comes up to this area?
Not many people, mainly just the maintenance and the supervisors and security. We're the only three people that ever come up to this area. Contractors come up here every now and then to service the exhaust fans and the lighting that are suspended above the stained glass. But the public never gets to come up here. A lot of people don't know, but the center of the thing is actually, it's open. And before the air conditioner was installed in the building, what they would do, they have little vents at the very top of the building. They would open windows in different floors, and it would cause a huge vacuum straight through the roof of this thing, straight through the roof of the building. And that was the air conditioning back then before they were actually installed.
There is one more door to open, and that is to the rooftop. Carl's perch above the old state house is the same perspective persons over the centuries caught from this bluff. From Civil War ships coming up the Mississippi River to possibly noticing Mark Twain's riverboat floating down.
It is beautiful to look at, but the hidden meaning is to be able to take a tour of the exhibits and to be able to reflect on the past, but then look to the future.
Louisiana's old state capitol still stands proud after all these years. That's been made possible because of the efforts of so many people who refuse to let it leave the Baton Rouge landscape, as well as Louisiana's collective memory. Their efforts now stand as a true testament to this castle on the hill. Welcome back to our electronic field trip of the old state capitol. My name is Charlie Winham, and we have experts here to take your questions about the old state capitol, beginning with a question that we will get from Louisa Hodges of Claiborne Elementary.
Hello, I'm Louisa Hodges. I'm calling from Claiborne Elementary School in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and here's my question. How many governors lived in this old state capitol? And also, who was the first governor to live in the capital?
Louisa, thank you very much. She asked how many lived. That's a good question, but maybe she's also asking how many worked in the old state capitol, too. So, Carol, why don't I have you start with that answer?
All right. A lot of people think that governors lived in the Capitol, but actually no governors ever lived in the Capitol. No one ever lived in the Capitol with the exception of at some point a custodian or two. Okay. But the governors didn't live there. The governors who worked there numbered about 18. The first governor was Isaac Johnson. He's the one who oversaw the building of the Capitol originally, but Isaac Johnson only was governor for 7 days.
Really?
He addressed the legislature, and then his term ended, and then another governor, Joseph Marshall Walker, took office at that point. So he's the first one to really serve a whole term in the governor's office. Then there were several, the first one to actually be inaugurated there was named Wycliffe. After that, there was a period of time, of course, during the Civil War and during Reconstruction, when the offices were in New Orleans, so there was no governor there at that time, of course. Then after the Civil War, when they came back to Baton Rouge, Joseph McHenry was the governor who served his term there, and it went all the way through Huey Long, and actually a couple after him, A.O. King was the governor for a little while before the new Capitol was built.
Okay, excellent. We have another question. We're going to hear, I believe, from a nice young lady from Claiborne Elementary. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Mrs. Crockett from Claiborne Elementary School in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. My questions are, will the old state capitol be used in the future for government purposes? And my other question is, other than visitors, what is the old state capitol used for today?
All right, Daniel, thank you very much for your question. Charlotte, what do you think?
We use the building a lot. Not only do we have visitors come in every day, and they do come from all over the world, we have about 70,000 visitors a year come into the old state capitol. Absolutely. And we use the building, of course, for the museum and for the history of the state. But we also use it for other things. We have weddings there almost every weekend. We have other kind of parties and galas there. The building is used a lot by a lot of politicians here in the state, but not necessarily. They do not serve in the House and Senate at the old state capitol any longer. Like I said, it is primarily a museum now.
Well, Danielle, thank you so much for that question. I believe we have a little bit more time, and a question that's been on my mind. I've heard Huey Long, he used to have a secret passageway somewhere between the old state capitol and a nearby hotel where he met with politicians and others. Does that passageway really exist, Susan? Or is that just a big old myth?
No, it really doesn't. There is a passageway that goes between what was called the Old Heidelberg and the King Hotel. Now they are the Hilton, Capital Area Hilton, and the Hotel Indigo.
Okay.
And that passageway was there to be used by the people who worked in those two hotels to be able to go back and forth with food and linens to service both of those hotels.
So that may have led to the legend of a bigger tunnel connecting to the Capitol.
It may have. Huey Long did spend a lot of time staying at the Old Heidelberg, and he did receive a lot of people there in his rooms there, and so he might have used that passageway. We don't really know that for sure, but if he needed to perhaps avoid some press, or sorry about that, Charlie, but it does happen, he might have decided to use that.
You just have to know where these tunnels exist then,
and
then follow the folks.
Yes.
So I apologize, you said that it exists. I mean, what is the condition of that passageway now?
I understand that it's closed up and it's
Okay.
not used any longer. Those are two separate hotels now, and they don't share service.
Right. Maybe down the road we'll find out if there, something of more history unfolds between that very interesting passageway. Whether it's those hotels or the old state capitol specifically, the restoration efforts that have been going on between all those three buildings. I want to talk about the old state capitol's renovation efforts. How big are we talking about? This seems quite a monumental task to restore this building to look like it does today.
It's a huge task.
I mean, younger folks just may be seeing that old state capitol. Well, what's the big deal? I've seen it as long as I've lived, so it obviously must have been looking like that. Not even 20, 30 years ago it was looking this good.
The restoration, the last restoration was from 1990 to 94. It closed in 1991 and it reopened in 1994. And during that period of time it was completely restored. Not to say that that was the last time anything was done to that building. Mm-hmm. The exterior has been completely waterproofed during the passing years. The fence was completely restored a few years ago. And the process of taking care of that building is a daily effort by a lot of people who help us tremendously at the building. And like I said, it's a grand old building, and we want it to stay grand, and so we work on it every day.
We have just a few minutes left. I'll start with you, Carol, but I'll ask each one of you, what is one of, if not your most favorite, what is one of your most favorite parts of the castle on the hill?
Well, actually, can I tell you a favorite story instead?
Well, sure.
One of my favorite stories about the old state capitol is the pond story. There was a pond on the grounds in front of the capitol, between the capitol and the river.
Really?
At that time, it was just a kind of a little lake pond, but at some point they decided they wanted a nice fountain. So they excavated the pond, and they were planning to concrete it and put a big fountain in the middle. When they excavated the pond, dug it up so they could put the concrete down, they found all kinds of artifacts in the bottom of it, because there was a rumor that during the Civil War, people in the town had hidden some of their valuable things in the pond.
Did they?
They did, to keep it away from Union troops. So they found diamonds and jewelry and silver service and all kinds of things, interesting things in the pond.
Susan, either interesting element or interesting story that really you gravitate towards?
Well, I think that what this question brings to mind to me is the people who come to the old capitol. We have visitors from all over the world, as we've said, but we also very much enjoy having our students. The Louisiana students can come, and I really love talking with them about the history of the building and leave them, with something that they can go and take back with them, and perhaps they'll continue their studies in history in Louisiana.
It's a beautiful walking history lesson for all ages, especially for students. And Charlotte, what do you take away the most?
I'm going to have to agree with what Susan said. I enjoy working with the students on a daily basis when they are in the building, and also the visitors from foreign countries that come into the building. You wonder, how in the world did they find us in Baton Rouge, Louisiana? Well, most of the time they Googled us, and they were able and came into the building. And I think just seeing people look at the stained glass dome for the first time, they're just amazed that is in a building like that.
And as Carol said, it's the aha moment.
Absolutely.
It really is.
Absolutely.
It's a beautiful facility that, thanks to so many volunteers who love this facility, want to make sure you go out and get there to enjoy beautiful architecture and rich, rich Louisiana history. Our time is up, and I hope you've enjoyed our trip to the old state capitol. We'd like to extend our thanks to our teachers and students for submitting their questions. And thank you, ladies, for fielding all of our questions from the students and teachers as well. And thank you for joining us for this electronic field trip. This field trip will be archived and available on LPB's website at lpb.org/education. I hope you will be able to join us for future LPB field trips. See you soon.